Hello and welcome to today's live. Today we're going to be talking about how habits can help us to create the life we want and how they can help us to be happy. In fact, habits, well, strictly speaking, it's their consequences and their outcomes really, but habits can be the factor that literally makes or breaks our contentment in life. So you'll want to listen up. I'm Vicky Newham and I'm hosting conversations on how we can create the life we want. Thanks so much for tuning in. Now, I've been teaching psychology for over 19 years now, and I am passionate about helping people to make changes in their lives. So, in psychology, habits are defined as actions that are triggered automatically by what we call context-specific cues. So, to give an example then, as soon as we've finished using the toilet, we wash our hands. As soon as we get into the car and shut the car door, then we immediately fasten our seatbelt. And so these are examples of where we have a cue in a particular situation, something that happens, which kind of acts as a trigger for something else. We flush the loo, that's the cue. Sorry about the rhyming. Flush the loo, that's the cue. And then we immediately turn on the tap and start washing our hands. Now, when an action is repeated in response to a cue, that cue quickly activates the same action each time it occurs. And this is how habits develop. So this process occurs through what's called associative learning. So we literally learn to associate two things with each other. Flushing the loo, washing our hands, shutting the car door, putting on our seatbelt, sitting on the sofa, putting the telly on. And so what's interesting about this process and this dynamic is that the whole thing becomes automatic really quickly. I know there's a whole load of stuff, and I see it repeated all the time, that you have to repeat a habit or something like 16 times or 30 times or whatever it is. I kind of stopped reading a lot of these things after a while, in order for it to become a habit. But the truth is that actually habits occur really quickly. That associative learning occurs very quickly. And so you simply need to shut your car door and you have reached for your seatbelt before you know it. And the before you know it bit is really interesting because that's the bit that is automatic. And so the cue literally prompts the action. So what's really good about this then is that because habits are automatic, and this is what makes them so important, and this is why they matter so much, because habits are automatic, we don't need to decide to wash our hands. We don't need to decide to put our seatbelt on. We don't need to decide to pick up the remote control. We just have the telly on before we know it. And so when these habits are a good thing, obviously that's really helpful for us. So we don't need to think about what we're doing. We don't need to pay attention to what we're doing. We don't need to be interested in what we're doing. And we don't even have to want to do it. We simply just do it. And our actions help to keep us safe. And this is what is so brilliant about habits. Well, when they're good ones, at least. So they persist really when kind of conscious motivation and interest have left the building long ago. And also, because we perform habits automatically, and we don't need to think about what we're doing and whether we want to do it and whether we've got time, etc. This has another benefit, which is that it frees up a load of resources in the working memory part of our brain. And what this means then is that those resources, are kind of free and are available for us to deploy on other tasks. And this can be really, really helpful. Well, at all times, anything that frees up capacity and resources in working memory helps us to be productive and efficient, etc. But when we are, for example, tired, when we are not feeling well, when we're preoccupied, or anxious about something or other, or if we have some kind of deficit or impairment to our working memory function, it can be really, really helpful to build in, so to make as many of our daily activities kind of, automatic. So make as many of them as habitual as we can do because of the benefits that I have described. So we also need to talk about then the elephant in the room, which is that obviously not all habits are beneficial. And unfortunately, the same automaticity occurs with those as it does with ones, which are beneficial. So, we slump down on the sofa and before we know it, we've activated the remote control and, we are fully immersed in news or some Netflix drama or something. Or, for example, we get a craving and before we know it, we've got the fridge door open and we're having a good old rummage and, we're stuffing our face full of, whatever takes our fancy. So it's important then for our kind of, well-being, it's important, for our happiness and our contentment that we are mindful of our habits and that we identify that, the habits that are useful, the habits that are beneficial, the habits that kind of serve us well and help us to achieve the kind of things that we want in life. And so if we are trying to, create a different kind of life, if we are trying to make some changes in our life, then these kinds of habits, these automatic behaviours really can be a deal breaker for all of us. Now, if you